Hello, it is June 15th. It's a Monday. Hope you had a great weekend. Hope you got to worship with the saints and to give praise to our God, and hope that was encouraging to you as well. We're going to study today in 1 Peter chapter 4 as we continue on down through this book of 1 Peter. We come to verse 12 today. And Peter is talking to some Christians who are dealing with some very difficult trials of their faith, temptations, persecutions, all kinds of difficult things. And we're going to be looking at that today and find out what Peter said to encourage those Christians and how we might also be encouraged as we look at these things today. In 1 Peter chapter 4, beginning at verse 12, Peter says, "Beloved, do not be surprised at the fiery trial when it comes upon you to test you, as though something strange were happening to you." And so here is something that I think is, in a sense, a word of encouragement. And Peter says, don't think it surprising. Don't think it as something strange. That you need to anticipate that there are going to be difficult times in life and that you are well equipped, you are well prepared. The Lord has blessed you in such ways that you can handle those difficulties. And so he says, don't think of it as something surprising. Then he says, but rejoice insofar as you share Christ's sufferings, that you may also rejoice and be glad when his glory is revealed. We know that when we read through the gospel accounts, we read about the suffering that Jesus endured, especially those last few days that he was walked here on earth before the crucifixion. That he had trials and he had abuse. He had insults that were hurled at him, and he was beaten. And then he was crucified. He was executed. And so we see all this suffering, but yet we see that he also was raised from the dead and that he ascended to the right hand of the Father. And here Peter says, you partake of Christ's sufferings, and that just as he suffered and went to glory, that you can have the glory that is a part of being a Christian, that eternal home in heaven. And then he says in verse 14, if you are insulted for the name of Christ, you are blessed. And he says, because the Spirit of glory and of God rests upon you. And so he says, when you endure those hard things, and especially when you do them because you're a Christian, that there is a great blessing in that you're counted worthy to suffer that shame, to suffer persecution, to suffer a special trial of your faith because of who you are. He says this, though, and I think this is another point of encouragement. He says, but let none of you suffer as a murderer, a thief, or an evildoer, or as a meddler. And so when you're living a faithful Christian life, there are certain kinds of suffering that you don't have to worry about. You don't have to worry about these criminal acts that some people suffer. We see that when Jesus was crucified, there were also two thieves there. And those thieves, well, they were deserving of a punishment from the governor. Their suffering was deserved, while Jesus's was undeserved. And so here he says, don't suffer like that. Make sure that you're living faithfully and you're not entering into any of those kinds of immoral or illegal activities. Then he says this, yet if anyone suffers as a Christian, let him not be ashamed, but let him glorify God in this matter. And so, as we look at this, we understand that he says, don't suffer as an evildoer. Don't suffer in some kind of a bad way. But if you suffer as a Christian, don't be ashamed. Wear it. Wear it as a badge of honor that you've been counted worthy to do that. And so there's some things I'd like for you to think about today as you go through life. And maybe there are times in which for your faith you do suffer. For your faith there are difficulties that you face, or maybe they're just everyday problems that you face. And know this, that we need to expect difficult times because God has fully equipped us to be able to handle those things, just as he wrote in verse 12. That when we do suffer as a Christian, that we are partaking in Christ's sufferings, and we can have an expectation of glory when this life is over, even though we suffer here for a little time. When we are persecuted, we're insulted, that make sure that it is for that good cause, for that noble name by which you're called. But don't suffer as an evildoer. Those people deserve their punishment, but you're counted worthy to suffer for the cause of Christ. And when you do suffer as a Christian, if there are those who persecute you or difficulties you have in your life because you are a Christian, don't be ashamed. Wear that, recognize that, and know that God appreciates what you're going through. I hope that you find that as a word of encouragement today, that as you may face difficulties in this life, you can look forward to the glory that is above. I really appreciate you listening today and watching this video. My name is Paul Adams, and this has been 5 Minutes of Encouragement.